Hello Overwatch fans, and welcome to the review of Overwatch Champion Series Hangzhou Champions Clash. My name is Master Dempsey from Shikigami, and I'm going to be going over the event and making my predictions. So, first, I want to introduce the teams at the event. We have 8 total teams from a variety of regions. So first, let's get into North America. From North America, we have Nightmare and Space Station Gaming. These two teams placed top 2, with Nightmare finishing first and Space Station finishing second in the qualifying NA Stage 1. On that Nightmare roster, we have Admiral and Ultraviolet on support, Clear and Kuffa on tank, and Lethal, Vision, and Zera on DPS. This is a very well-rounded roster, and they did perform very well in the North American region, getting an unexpected upset against Liquid and Space Station and beating them to this event. And for Space Station, we have a pretty strong roster. We have Kellen on tank, Bliss and CJ on support, and Seeker and Sugarfree on DPS, with substitutes of Hawk on tank and Scissors on DPS. This is another quite strong roster, at least regionally, and yeah, this is a team with a bit of explosive power, especially with that with Sugarfree being so good on that flex DPS. Now, I'm going to do a quick pivot to EU with Virtus.pro and OWCS. First to Virtus.pro. Virtus.pro has been the most dominant team in the European region. They've won all of their matches and have done so in mostly dominant fashion, in part because of their recent additions. First, Pistola is a notoriously good tank. I remember specifically his performance in the Overwatch World Cup, the last one before the Esports World Cup took over. Then we have on support, Gala and Fixa. Gala is a very good flex support, and Fixa has always been a stable, good main support. And two kind of explosive hitters in Shockwave and Jwoo, who can have really explosive peaks as players. This is your premier team from EU. And yeah, they might be able to upset some of the Asian teams. Now onto OWCS. This is a bit of an upset kind of team that took spots from teams like Gen G and Twisted Minds and the Ultimates, who were expected to take this spot for Europe. But this team had a very explosive playoffs run. So on support for this team, we have Haku and Landon. On tank, we have Zyad and Fred. And on DPS, we have QLM, LBB D7, and Checkmate from that historic Florida Mayhem run with Merit and someone. And we also have a substitute DPS in Cores. Speaking bluntly, this team is probably not going to do too well at this event, but they did surprise me in their performance to make it to the event, so they might surprise me again. A good indicator, or like a representation of the respect they can kind of give, is in their coaching and their manager, with Junkbuck and AK being very strong components of this team. Now heading over to Asia, we have Team Falcons and Crazy Raccoon. These have been the top 2 teams for a very long time in OWCS, pretty much its entire run. Those who haven't been watching since the last event will notice there are some changes to this Falcons roster, namely in the absence of Smurf. This team is now made up of Chio and Fielder on support, Dropper and Stalker on DPS, Surmajet also on support, and Humbin on tank. Humbin has had mixed plays on tank. His off tank, or his traditional off tanks like Diva, Zarya, Sigma, are still very good. He's had a pretty good Maga and a pretty good Hazard as well. It is getting, when he's not able to flex onto those roles that Fearless usually filled, is where Falcons is usually at its weakest, but they're still a very strong team and actually finished first from the Asia tournament. Next, we have Crazy Raccoon, who has historically been either first or second. They've won more head-to-head matchups against Team Falcons, but for the big tournaments like this Asian qualifiers or OWCS finals last year, they did finished second to Falcons. Now, this team has not gone over many changes. It's still that core roster of Jumbin on tank and Max on tank, Lip and Hisang on DPS, Chorong Shu support. Still very strong, still can lock in and just destroy their opponents. Crazy Raccoons and Falcons are predicted to be the two finalists for this tournament. Now, a new addition is China. While they are a new addition, you will likely recognize these names. We have, once again, who is the core of Hangzhou Spark of old, with Gushui and Ligue on tank, Leave, Shy, and Aprita on DPS, and Monk and Mew on support, with Mew having former names like Xerneas and Develtal. This is the premier Chinese roster. If any team is going to challenge Raccoons and Falcons, this is likely it, but it all depends on meta. That being said, they're still quite strong in metas that favor Falcons and Raccoons. They just won't be as strong, I believe. And to our final team, who not have a page, we have Team CC with a roster of Kaneki, Insane, and Pineapple on DPS, Gaga on tank, Hayo Jin on support, and Farway 1987 on support. Those familiar, Hayo Jin is renamed by Super Rich of the Hangzhou Spark and the original Team CC that went on an Insane run. And yeah, this team is quite strong, filled with former Overwatch League players, with Kaneki, Pineapple, Gaga, Super Rich in 1987, and the new addition of Insane to this roster of Overwatch League stars. Yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty solid roster. I think they're leaning around that Virtus.pro kind of level of competition. They might be able to upset or even take a few maps from, like, once again, Falcons and Raccoons, but they're probably finishing in that 4th through 5th kind of placement. So let's go through my power rankings and predictions. So, to the schedule, we have first match, Team Falcons versus OWCS. I am going to be predicting Falcons to take this pretty easily, 3-0. They have dropped maps to lesser teams here and there, especially in the Korean qualifiers, so it might be a 3-1 play, actually. I'm going to be swapping up. I think OWCS with the right bans can take a map from Falcons, so yeah, I'll say 3-1. Virtus.pro versus once again. This is going to be an interesting match. I think it all comes down to meta for this one. If it's a more like off-tank heavy meta, I think Vistola can beat out Ligue, and if it's a more main tank kind of meta, I think this Gushui on dive heroes is still incredibly strong. And yeah, I think it will come down to this meta or hero bans. I'm gonna give the edge to once again, and I'll say 3-2 for once again for this second match. Now, Nightmare versus Team CC. This is a pretty interesting match. Team CC, Nightmare is definitely a strong team for North America, but I have a feeling they might, even though they placed first to qualify, they may suffer a bit facing these international teams, even just this seeding. I think Team CC is going to take this 3-1. There's still some explosive potential from Nightmare with their players. Vision, Zera, and Lethal are still strong DPS players, and Ultraviolet has been having a bit of a renaissance. So I believe they can maybe upset Team CC here. But Team CC just have a more proven roster internationally, as they've had players like win matches in the Overwatch League against strong teams. But this might be like a moment where we see like the old guard falling off with a new guard kind of replacing them. I will still say, you know what, I will say a 3-2 for Team CC, just because I still have them favored, but I'm excited to see what Nightmare can kind of showcase. Now for Crazy Raccoon versus Space Station, this is just an unfortunate seeding for Space Station. They have that explosive power of Seeker and Sugar Free, but I don't. It's Lip and Hisang. Like, they're very strong and can compete with even the peaks of that Space Station DPS duo, and their support line and tank line, not to be rude to the Space Station tanks, they get eclipsed by Crazy Raccoon. I see a confident 3-0 by Raccoons here. So in the upper bracket semis, we now have Team Falcons versus once again, and Team CC versus Crazy Raccoon. So Falcons versus once again is going to be very interesting. This is the meta-dependent one. I think Hanbin can edge out League A on those kind of off-tanks, just like with Virtus.pro, but if it's Gushway in a dive tank kind of meta, the Falcons just might be screwed. Their DPS line can compete with Falcons, especially with Proper is a flex DPS who can play hit scam and have very flashy moments, but I believe Shy will outclass Proper if he's forced into like a kind of like an Ashe duel kind of thing. Potentially a Sojourn duel as well. And Stalker and Leave, I think they're on similar levels of skill. Obviously, we haven't seen Leave compete against Stalker since the Overwatch League, but yeah, I think there is potential. I will say I'm more confident in the coaching staff of Team Falcons. Just to review once again, as a coaching staff of Kama, Luke, and Yang Xiaolong versus the Falcons, who have A, Levy, 9K, and Sparkle. I think the Falcons hero bands are going to be better, which is how they're going to edge out once again in this matchup. But I still think it'll be very close, so I'll say 3-2 for Falcons against once again. Moving up to the other side of the bracket, we'll have Team CC versus Crazy Raccoon. This is the easy side of the bracket. I like members of Team CC. They've competed on the Overwatch League level, but so have Crazy Raccoon, and they've done it a lot better. I mean, Jumbin and Max, they didn't do great at the Overwatch League level, and Heesang was kind of middling, but post-Overwatch League, they've been insane. And yeah, their Team CC cannot fight against this Crazy Raccoons roster. I'm going to say another 3-0 for the Raccoons to cement our upper bracket final. We have a rematch of Falcons and Raccoons. This is going to be an interesting one. I think, this is tough. I will go with the Crazy Raccoons here. I think looking at this seeding, I think it's a possibility that Raccoons weren't trying their hardest, so they'd have an easier kind of bracket for this tournament. I believe, like, in their kind of regular season matches and for, like, the Korean tournament, the Raccoons outschooled the Falcons here, but they underperformed in the qualifiers for this tournament. And I think this is because they wanted an easier path to the grand finals. And so I'm going to predict Falcons losing to Raccoons 2-3. Now let's deal with our lower bracket. If I am unmistaken, I believe it'll be OWCS versus Virtus.pro and teams and Nightmare versus Space Station, which is very boring. EU versus EU, NA versus NA. Not the happiest about that, but oh well. So, OWCS versus Virtus.pro. I mean, Virtus.pro, undefeated EU team. I don't expect them to be defeated by another European team. Yeah, I think I'm pretty confident with a Virtus.pro 3-0, maybe a 3-1. But I'm going to stick with 3-0 and Virtus.pro moving to these lower bracket quarterfinals. In the bottom side with Space Station Nightmare, I'm not sure if Nightmare Space Station was a fluke. I mean, Space Station would love to be in Nightmare's position right now, facing Team CC over Crazy Raccoon, so I don't think they threw the tournament for the bracket. I think I'm going to expect a bit of an upset of Space Station beating Nightmare. I know Nightmare won in the tournament, but I don't know, I just don't feel like Space Station are going to give it up that easy, like be a first team eliminated. Yeah, that core of roster just seems too determined to let that pass. So I'm going to say Space Station beating out Nightmare 3-2 and entering the lower bracket quarterfinals. So, with the lower bracket quarterfinals first match, we'll have Virtus.pro versus, once again, that rematch. I don't think there's going to be much of a difference. I think once again we'll take Virtus.pro out once again. Pun intended. Once again is looking good. Virtus.pro still looking good, but it's just that little bit extra. But I think there's great upset potential here. This is one of those matches where it's like, it feels too good for Virtus.pro. It feels wrong picking once again. So, you know what, screw it. It'll be an upset, but Virtus.pro will 3-2 once again and move to the lower bracket semis. Now with Team CC versus Space Station, I think this is an interesting match. Team CC, like I said, they they have that, and I don't know if they can get the same edge against Space Station like they did Nightmare. Gaga, Pineapple in the support line, that's pretty strong, but I believe that can be matched by Space Station. Specifically in their DPS, Kellen is also quite good, just not as good as Gaga, I think. Their support line is also quite strong. So I think I'll predict a 3-2 for Space Station over Team CC, moving to the lower bracket semis. So, Space Station versus, once again, NA versus EU. This will be nice. I think, this is really hard to choose because, yes, I very much like the power that Seeker and Sugarfree have together, but also Virtus.pro is just so stable of a European super team. I think I'm going to go Virtus.pro 3-2 over Space Station. I'm not confident in that, but yeah, I think that's the best guess I can give. And this leads us to our lower bracket finals. Virtus.pro versus Falcons. Yeah. I really like Virtus.pro, but Falcons are just Virtus.pro on like 9 different steroids. They're a flex tank specialist team with Hanbin. I have way more confidence in Proper Stalker than Jwoo Shockwave, and it's Fielder Chio versus Gala and Fixa. I think they just get outclassed here. I don't think it's very close. I'm going to say 3-0 for Falcons against Virtus.pro. To lead us to our rematch in the finals. Raccoons versus Falcons. I don't think much will change between the first and second matchup. I'm going to say a 4-2 for the Crazy Raccoons. Falcons have historically been quite excellent in the finals, so you know what? I'll say 4-2 with a draw. Get a little crazy with it. So that is my power rankings, or my bracket prediction, which will lead the standings at Alcadia and Nightmare in 7th and 8th, once again, and Team CC in 5th through 6th, Space Station in 4th, Virtus.pro in 3rd, Falcons in 2nd, and Raccoons taking the tournament. Yeah, that is my predictions, and thank you for watching.